most important parameter in your CBC. Now, physiological variations in hemoglobin concentration. Class, I have a question. When you hear the word physiological, what comes into your mind? Body. Okay, very good. What else? Function of the body. Okay. All right, class. To help you understand this, your hemoglobin could change depending on the status of your body. Now, your increased hemoglobin could occur in exercise. Class, to help you understand this, I have a question. In exercise, what happens to your body? Sige nga, let's test your knowledge. What happens to your body in exercise? Increase oxygen need. How? How does your body have an increased oxygen need in exercise? Can you tell me, Mr. Kamar? So you said increased oxygen needs. Bakit? How does that happen?
Marinig po ako, sir. Marinig ako, sir.
You're tired of doing exercise. Okay, Miss Marian, you're raising your hand.
Marinig ako, sir.
Nagsalita na po ata si Mr. Kamar, sir.
Parang bilian po tayo marinig.
Narinig na kita. I can hear you now.
Okay po. Ang exercise po, sir, is when you do some exercise, sir, nag-increase ang oxygen needs mo because for doing some weight, for example, lifting or running, parang basta, sir, parang napapagod kayo, sir, tapos yung mas malaki yung carbon nyo po is marami na dito. So, pag need nyo talaga ng oxygen po sa body, sir. Opo, sir.
Okay. Ibahin ko yung question. Kapag nag-exercise kayo, what happens to your lungs? Starts with the letter P, class. Sa Tagalog, it starts with the letter H.
Hubak, sir.
Not palpitate. It's what you call panting. Hindi rin hubak. Hapo. Yan, pwede hapo. Panting. Hinihingal sa Tagalog, class. So kapag hinihingal kayo, there is what? Increase what? Oo nga, there's increased CO2. Aside from CO2, what else? There's increased oxygen. So there is increased oxygen need. Kasi di ba hinihingal kayo? There is increased oxygen need. Now, what does your hemoglobin do to oxygen? If you recall sa mga previous topic natin sa lecture.
Ang hemoglobin po, sir, is carry oxygen po.
So it carries oxygen. So if there is increased oxygen need, your hemoglobin is also
increasing, sir.
How does your hemoglobin increase, Mr. Kamar? Anong kailangan ma-produce?
Kailangan po ang hemoglobin, sir, come from the bone marrow, sir.
Saan nakikita si hemoglobin, Mr. Kamar?
Sa blood po, sir, sa RBC.
Sa RBC. So there will be increased RBC production, leading to increased hemoglobin. Ulitin ko, class, ha? In exercise, we have what you call panting, wherein there is an increased oxygen need. And if there is increased oxygen need, your body will produce more RBC. And when there is more RBC, there is more hemoglobin. Another class would be your posture. So from lying, yung nakahiga ka class, to sitting would increase your hemoglobin concentration. Okay, here's another one, altitude class. The higher the altitude, what happens to your oxygen? Increase or decrease? Lower. Decrease. Di ba nga class, pansin yung mga astronaut, pag gumaano sila, they have their own oxygen supply. So the higher the altitude, the lesser the oxygen. And if there is less oxygen, what does your body do? As a coping mechanism, what does your body do? Your body would then compensate it by producing more RBC, leading to more hemoglobin. Very good. Again, in altitude class, the higher the altitude, the lesser the oxygen. And if your body is having less oxygen, it will produce more RBC, causing increased hemoglobin. How about smoking class? Class, I have a question. What type of hemoglobin can be found in smokers? What type of hemoglobin can be found in your smokers? You still remember our variations in hemoglobin. Starts with the letter C. I'm seeing students typing. Sige, go. Correct. Very good, Miss Abaw. It's your carboxyhemoglobin. Now, in smokers class, there is less oxygen that can bind to your hemoglobin. And when that happens, class, what would your body do? Will
increase carbon dioxide in the body, sir.
increase RBC production. Remember your mechanism of the body when coping, if there is decreased oxygen, magpuproduce siya ng more RBC. Kasi the more RBC, the more hemoglobin, the more oxygen will be able to bind. Okay? Again, in smokers class, you have increased carboxyhemoglobin, which causes your less oxygen to bind to normal hemoglobin. This will cause your body to have increased RBC production, leading to increased hemoglobin. Naintindihan? Are there any questions? Okay, let's proceed to another physiological variation. Decreased hemoglobin class can be seen in elderly due to renal insufficiency, testosterone deficiency, diminished erythropoiesis, and myelodysplasia. Let's start with testosterone deficiency. Class, in our lesson 1 sa lecture, what does your testosterone do in regards to hematology? You still remember? It's more of a recall class.
Promotes erythropoiesis po, sir.
Alright, very good, Miss Banyadera. It would promote erythropoiesis. And when it promotes erythropoiesis class, there would be increased RBC, increased hemoglobin. Now, in this case, decrease siya due to deficiency sa elderly nyo. leading to decrease RBC, leading to decrease hemoglobin. Naintindihan? Another one would be diminished erythropoiesis. Question class. What part of the body does your erythropoiesis occur in adults? Bone marrow. So if there is diminished erythropoiesis, Ms. Banyadera, what happens to your bone marrow? What happened to your bone marrow?
Nag-decrease po ang bone marrow, sir, nawawala or damage po.
Nawawala. Damage. Hindi nawawala ang bone marrow. It could be damage ang bone marrow mo, leading to decrease RBC, decrease hemoglobin. Nakikita niyo yung pattern, class. Whenever there's a problem with your RBC, there's gonna be also a problem in your hemoglobin. If there's a requirement for oxygen, there will be more RBC. Then another one would be myelodysplasia. So when you say, class, pag na-encounter niyo yung word myelo, based sa diniscuss natin dati, what cell is related to your myelo? Anong cell sa hematology? Leukocytes. Very good, Ms. Barcelona. So it's your WBCs. Now, in myelodysplasia class, we have your so-called increased production of WBC. And when there is increased production of WBC, specifically your young cells, these young WBCs are known as blasts. There would be decreased RBC in the bone marrow. In the bone marrow. Ang gagawin ng myelodysplasia kasi, class, sobrang dami ng production ng WBC sa bone marrow to the point that the entire bone marrow would be overrun ng WBC. Specifically, your blasts. To the point, wala nang place para mag-produce ng RBC. Ulitin ko, in your myelodysplasia class, there is increased production of WBC, also known as your young cells or blasts. These young cells or blasts or WBC would occupy the entire bone marrow, causing decreased RBC production, leading to decreased hemoglobin. Okay, another one would be renal insufficiency. Class, when you hear the word renal, what organ of the body is this related with? Kidney. Very good, Ms. Abaw. Now, Ms. Abaw, in your kidney, what hormone is produced that helps in RBC? What hormone is produced that helps in RBC production? Anyone can answer aside from Ms. Abaw. Hindi niya alam. What is produced?
Erythropoietin, sir.
Very good. It's your erythropoietin. And your erythropoietin class is managed by, anong ano yun? It's managed by what? Hindi nyo na maalala. Mag-long-piece nga tayo. Starts with the letter J, class.
Juxtamelor?
Hindi, come on.
Hindi.
No, it's not that. Sir, come on. Alam to ni Miss Ayet, feeling ko. Sige, she's typing it. So what's the enzyme that starts with the letter J that manages your erythropoietin? Alright, very good, Ms. Chiquito. It's your Janus kinase 2, also known as your JAK2. So when there is renal insufficiency, when you say insufficiency class, there's a problem with your kidney. Kapag may problem sa kidney mo, your erythropoietin is not properly produced. JAK2, Janus kinase 2, is not properly synthesizing or managing erythropoietin, causing decreased RBC, decreased hemoglobin. Intindihan? Ulitin ko, class. In renal insufficiency, this would involve your kidney. And when it involves your kidney, class, it would produce erythropoietin that is managed by your Janus kinase 2. In renal insufficiency, you have a damaged kidney. That would lead to decreased erythropoietin, causing decreased RBC, decreased hemoglobin. Intindihan? Are there any questions? Alright. Sige, mamaya recitation tayo. Alright. When would you perform your hemoglobin estimation? Now, these are the indications when to do hemoglobin estimation, class. The first one would be to determine the presence and severity of anemia. Class, I have a question. Anong level, or rather, what is the level of your hemoglobin if you have anemia? Low, decrease. Very low class decrease. So if you want to know if the patient is anemic, you would always check first the hemoglobin. And if it is low, less than normal, then the patient can be suggested of anemia. Not confirmed, class, not confirmed, but suggested of anemia. Okay, another one would be the screening for polycythemia. Class, confirmation would be via maybe in your blood smear. And Miss Belonio, what would you see in your blood smear? What do you call those terms? Dalawang terms yun. You would see what? Oh nga, you're gonna see blood smear in a smear. But ano yung makikita mo that is suggestive of kakadiscuss lang natin sa lecture? No, not thick and thin. Pa-discuss lang natin, class. Alright, you can see poikilocytes. And what else? Isa pa. Mesocytes. So may variation ng shape and sizes. May microcytic, may macrocytic. So your final confirmation would be what you see in your blood smear, class. If there is poikilocytes and anisocytes. How about this one, class? Screening for polycythemia. Class, what does your polycythemia mean? You recall our lesson 1?
Increase of RBC, sir.
Increase of RBC lang ba? Remember the word poly. Poly means many. So aside from RBC, ano pang kasama, Mr. Kamar?
Hemoglobin, sir.
Cell lang, cell. We're talking about cythemia. Cell, cyte. Hindi kasama yun. So RBC and tumor.
White blood cell.
Okay, WBC and platelets. So, tama rin si Ms. Marcelo. So, in polycythemia and you have increased RBC, WBC, and platelets. Thus, here, class, you would have very high hemoglobin. Okay? Then response to specific therapy in anemia. Class, we have what you call iron deficiency anemia. In your iron deficiency anemia, sige nga, let's test your general knowledge. How would you treat? Anong tawag dun sa gamot na nire-reseta sa iron deficiency anemia, class?
Sangobion, sir.
Hindi. Hindi yan, Joyer. No. Alright, it's your ferrous sulfate. So, here's the trick, class. The doctor would give a prescription. Re-resetahan kayo ng doktor ng ferrous sulfate for a week. 1 week nyong iti-take yun. Pero prior to taking, you would have your hemoglobin tested. So let's say ang hemoglobin ng patient nyo is 10 grams per ml. Now, after 1 week of taking ferrous sulfate, there was an increase of to 15 grams per ml. So your hemoglobin estimation can check if the treatment is effective or not. Okay? Ulitin ko. It can be used to determine if the treatment for a certain type of anemia is effective or not. Then estimation of RBC indices. Class, ano yung tatlo yung RBC indices?
MCV, MHC, MHCH.
MCH, MCHC. Now, sa tatlong to, which uses hemoglobin in computing your indices? Pwede na kayong mag-long quiz, 1 to 100. Joke lang. Are you sure, Miss Manadera, it's your MCB?
MCH po.
Alright, MCHN.
MCHC, kasi may H, sir.
What does your MCB use? Anong ginagamit ng MCB nyo?
For the size po, sir.
So, so it's your hematocrit.
FL po.
Hematocrit. Then, it can also be used, class, in selection of blood donors. Sino na dito nag-try mag-donate ng dugo? May nakapag-donate na ba ng blood dito? Wala pa. Okay, class. Meron? Teka, perfectionist planners. Planning pa lang. Okay. In your screening of blood donors, class, we have what you call a screening procedure. Merong list yan na kailangan makapasa yung donor. And one of those would be having the normal hemoglobin. Now, what does ang ginagawa ng mga blood bank, class, in your practice in the future kapag naging intern na kayo is that you have to test donors who have 12.5 grams per DL ng hemoglobin. If they are less than 12.5 grams per DL, they are rejected. If they are greater than or equal to 12.5 grams per DL, they will be accepted. Plus, bakit sa tingin nyo kapag mababa ang hemoglobin, bawal kunan ng blood sa blood donation? Anong tingin niyang reason? Yes, anemic. But what happens, Ms. Banyadera? Remember
Possible, sir, na makulangan ng oxygen po yung tao, sir, yung blood donor po.
So kapag nakulangan ng oxygen yung blood donor, what would happen to the donor? Anong mangyayari sa donor, class?
Manghina, sir, na possible na dili mag-circulate ang blood in all body na possible stroke or death. Char lang.
Mahilo, magko-collapse. Nangyari to sa akin, class. I want to share to you. Nung intern ako, we went to Bataan. That's an area here sa Luzon. Wherein we had to took the blood of one of the donors sa isang, it was a marine, nakalimutan ko yung pangalan ng school eh. Basta parang ng mga seaman ng marine sa Bataan. I forgot the exact name of the school. Ayun, MAAP. So, nag-donate sila doon sa MAAP. Tapos, one of the donors, hindi siya nagsabi ng na ano pala siya, na anemic siya. Tapos nung tinest namin sa hemoglobinometer, yung maliit na machine for determining your hemoglobin, nasa 12.6 naman. So kinonsider namin, tinanggap pa rin namin. After namin makunan class, nahimatay siya. Kasi nahimatay siya. So we had to call the doctor, we had to, so whenever, doon namin na-realize na it's not just acceptable na 12.5, it's much better, as much as possible, higher than 12.5. Kasi nga class, di ba sabi ko sa inyo, not everything in the book can be applied in your practice, in our profession. Sometimes you have to adjust. But in the book class, the acceptable would be greater than or equal to 12.5. Pero then again, you have to consider also yung weight, yung itsura ng pasyente. Alright? Are there any more questions, clarifications? Okay, let's proceed. So there are plenty of different methods, class, for your hemoglobin determination. Now, one of the oldest and one of the ancient, kasi hindi ko to naabutan, class. Hindi ko to naabutan tong method na to. Hindi rin to naabutan ng mga naging teachers ko nung college. Would be your gasometric method. Now, your gasometric method, class, one of those methods involved using gas would be your Van Slyke method. In your Van Slyke method, class, your oxygen carrying capacity is being measured by the Van Slyke apparatus. So this would be your Van Slyke apparatus, class. Ayan. That is your Van Slyke apparatus. Now, ang mini-measure dito is the oxygen carrying capacity of your hemoglobin. This is based on the formula that 1 gram of hemoglobin can bind 1.34 ml of oxygen. Again, in your Van Slyke method, class, gasometric. When you say gas, this would refer to your oxygen. Diba, ang oxygen nyo is a type of gas. This would measure oxygen carrying capacity using the Van Slyke apparatus. This is based on the formula, class, that 1 gram of hemoglobin can bind with 1.34 ml of oxygen. It does not measure carboxy hemoglobin, salt hemoglobin, and met hemoglobin. So, ang nami-measure niya lang, class, is yung normal hemoglobin niya. Pero yung mga abnormal hemoglobin such as your carboxy, salt, and met hemoglobin are not being measured. This is a time-consuming and expensive procedure. Ito palang, class, tong apparatus na to would be very expensive. Kaya hindi siya ginagawa. Maybe this is done in, I'm not sure if this is still being used. I think sa mga chemists, they could use it. But sa atin, sa profession natin sa medical technology, we do not use this type of apparatus. Then results are 2% less accurate than other methods. So doon pa lang, class, mababa na yung accuracy niya. By 2%. And remember, sa profession natin, you need to have very high accuracy yung mga methods. Questions for your Van Slyke, the gasometric method? Okay. So after your gasometric method, class, we have your chemical method. Now, in your chemical method, class, iron content of hemoglobin is first estimated. So this time naman, class, instead of oxygen, you would be measuring your iron content. Class, question. What is the iron form of your hemoglobin? What is the iron form of your hemoglobin?
Ferric.
Sure. Ferrous form. Okay. Non-heme yung ferric, ha? Ingat kayo kung nyo yung pagpalit. So, ferrous form of your iron is first estimated. Now, this is derived by wherein 1 gram of 100 grams of hemoglobin would contain 374 grams of iron. Again, this is derived class from the statement that 100 grams of hemoglobin would contain 374 grams of iron. So here's a question. 1 gram of hemoglobin contains how many grams of iron?
3.74.
Alright.
3.74.
So 3.74. So your chemical method class is time consuming. Then another advantage ng chemical method nyo class is that you can use it to calibrate all other methods of hemoglobin estimation. Sige, copy lang. Take your time. I'll be uploading a recording of this later class para you can review. You will have your quiz on this next Friday. And reminders, you have your quiz this coming Friday class on your absolute and relative count. Okay. So one of the chemical methods class would be your specific gravity method. Now your specific gravity method class is a rough estimate made from the specific gravity of blood. This specific gravity method class is also known as your copper sulfate technique. This time class, you would base everything from your specific gravity. Use in mass screening like selection of donors. So ito yung ginagamit namin dati class nung intern kami kapag meron kaming what you call a massive blood drive. So yung mga tipong 100 donors ang aanuhin namin. So we don't have enough time or machine to test their hemoglobin one by one. So we would use a copper sulfate technique. Now ang nangyayari dito class is that we would get copper sulfate, ilalagay namin yan sa isang beaker. Now, ipiprick namin yung patient, ipiprick namin through capillary puncture. Then a drop of blood is allowed to fall in the copper sulfate. Now, yung copper sulfate nyo class, this has a specific gravity of 1.053. 1.053. Now, after dropping the drop of blood class, if it will get covered with copper proteinate. Now, yung 1.53 na SG class, if you convert that into your hemoglobin, it is equal to 12.5 grams per DL hemoglobin. Ulitin ko. Sa copper sulfate technique, gagamit kayo ng copper sulfate. Si copper sulfate class, merong specific gravity na 1.053. Yung 1.053, thank you, Miss Nelba. Ingat po. Thank you. Thank you for visiting. Alright. Okay. So yung 1.053 niya class would have 12.5 is equal to 12.5 grams per DL of hemoglobin. Now, pag nilagay niyo yung drop, inayaan yung mag-fall. If the blood sinks, lumubog, meaning mas mabigat, your hemoglobin content estimated is greater than 12.5. Pero kapag lumutang, magaan, it is less than 12.5.
Sir,
Yes.
bali sir kapag, pero hindi siya masabi sir,
Typically, the iron content.
pag normal sir, nasa gitna siya sir.
Pag normal, hindi mo masasabing normal. Ano lang yan, lulutang lang yan at lulubog. And when you say lumubog, dito sa baba, dapat, for it to be considered normal, Joher, nandito siya. Nandito siya. As in, nakalutang talaga siya. As in, yung kung paano mo nang i-accept. Yung 1.053 na yan, na SG na yan, that is equivalent to 12.5 grams per DL. Kapag lumubog yung hemoglobin nyo, ibig sabihin, greater than 12.5 yung hemoglobin content niya. So, accept mo. Pero kapag lumutang siya, if it floats, you have to reject it. Questions? Naintindihan? Now, in your Sally's acid hematin method class, the principle is blood is mixed with an acid solution that would convert hemoglobin to brown-colored acid hematin. Again, in your Sally's acid hematin, blood is mixed with an acid solution that would convert hemoglobin to a brown-colored acid hematin. You would dilute it with water till brown color matches that of a brown glass standard. Class, sa sisi nyo, you must have encountered the word standard. So what does standard mean sa sisi? What does the
Basis, ma'am? Ay, basis, sir?
Basis, yes, pwede. What else? Give me a better
Reference?
Reference. Or your comparator. Within the ranges. So, hemoglobin value is read directly from the scale. Ikakopy niya lang, tas ano lang ako ng nagkulat ako eh. Hindi ko kasi tinitingnan yung GC. Meron palang mag-evaluate sa class na nag-evaluate tuloy. Hindi na kayo makakapag-google. May klase ba kayo bukas ng 9 to 8? Asynchronous daw. Okay, class. Here are the steps in your Sally's acid hematin method, class. So first, you're going to prepare your materials, specifically your Sally's hemoglobinometer. So this would be your hemoglobinometer pipette. Now, di ba naalala nyo, class, lahat ng pipette nyo merong mga markings. So this hemoglobinometer pipette has a marking of 20 UL. And your 20 UL, class, is just equal to more or less 1 drop of blood. Alam niyo, hindi ko ito maalala na ginawa namin ito nung college. Iniisip ko siya nung last week pa, kung ginawa namin ito sa college. Hindi ko maalala. Anyways, your hemoglobinometer pipette would use 1 drop of blood until you get it to the mark of 20 UL. Then you will be also using your hemoglobinometer tube. Now, your hemoglobinometer tube has a marking of gram percent. 2, 4, ganyan yan. The lowest marking would be 2. Ang unit niya, gram percent. Then we also have, class, your comparator box. So this would be your standard. Ito yung standard na class. Yan yung pagbabasihan nyo. That's the one where you're gonna compare it to. Then you're also going to use what you call 10 normal hydrochloric acid. Now, if you recall your previous chemistry, I think this was in your organic or inorganic chem, you have what you call normality. Now, normality, class, or a normal solution is made when 1 gram of your substance is dissolved in a 1 liter of your solvent. So your solvent here, class, would refer to your water. Your substance here would refer to your HCl. So to make 10 and not 10 normal hydrochloric acid, class, ilang liters ng tubig ang kailangan? Ilang liters ng tubig?
10 liters, sir.
10 liters. So yung 1 normal solution is equal to 1 gram to 1 liter. Ganun ka-diluted, class. Imagine mo 1 gram ng HCl, i-dilute mo to 10 liters ng H2O. Sobrang hindi na ata siya considered as acidic. Now, you may be wondering, sir, bakit kailangan namin i-dilute yan? Remember, if you use strong acid in doing hemoglobin determination, class, your acid would cause the destruction of your proteins, specifically yung globin chains. No? And when that happens, class, magkaka-error yung result. So you're not allowed to use very strong acid or very strong alkali. Kaya kayo nagdi-dilute. Iiyak naman ako. Naka-online, naka-on-cam tayo lang. Si Mia, first time ko nakita ng on-cam. Pati si Sipday, joke lang si Sipi nag-online.
Wala na, timing pa, sir, nga nagpa-evaluation.
Eh.
Plus 20. Plus 20.
Kaya naman tayo sa plus 5. Sige lang, iniisip ko pa kasi class magpa-long quiz sa inyo. 1 to 100.
Basta di recorded, sir.
They recorded, pero
We will do our best, basta di recorded.
walang Morse pag 1 to 100. Parang lang, recalls lang from prelim hanggang midterms. Pero pinag-iisipan ko pa lang. Okay, so after your 10 normal hydrochloric acid, you would have your stirrer or your glass trap. So mamaya malalaman niyo yung purpose niyan. Then distilled water, later as well. Okay, so here's what you're going to do, class. Using your dropper, you're going to fill the hemoglobinometer up to the lowest marking with 10 normal hydrochloric acid. So the nearest marking would be your 2 gram per cent. So 2 yung pinaka-lowest marking niya. So pupunuin mo ng 10 normal hydrochloric acid. 2 gram per cent. After that, class, ilalagay nyo na yung hemoglobinometer tube sa comparator box dito sa gitna. Itsura na, yan sa gitna. After putting it in the middle, you would now perform your blood collection. So in this method, class, you're going to perform capillary puncture. And after pricking, you're going to aspirate it using the hemoglobinometer pipette. You have to suck the blood until the marking of your 20 UL. Then after that, class, na na-draw nyo na yung blood dun sa 20 UL, you're gonna mix it sa hemoglobinometer. So, dahan-dahan yung i-dispense. Kapag na-dispense nyo na, class, you're going to mix the content. So, pwede nyo gamitin yung glass rod, yung stirrer, pang-mix dyan. After mixing, class, you wait for 10 minutes. Now, bakit 10 minutes? The reason for that would be that is the amount of time wherein hemoglobin is converted to acid hematuria. After that, class, kung na-convert na nag-wait na kayo ng 10 minutes, you're going to add distilled water. Sir, bakit mag-a-add ng distilled water? The reason, class, why you need to add distilled water is to make your hemoglobinometer appearance similar to your comparator box. Again, kaya kayo naglalagay ng tubig, class, kasi gusto nyo same sila ng kulay sa comparator box, sa standard nyo. Lagay ka lang ng lagay ng tubig class hanggang same na kayo ng kulay. Kita nyo, almost similar. Not that same talaga, but almost similar. Now, paano may malalaman yung hemoglobin? You're going to read kung saan ka nag-stop. Kung saan ka nag-stop, maglagay ng water. You're going to stop, you're going to read where you stop, what marking you stop at. Reading at the lower meniscus. Alam niyo yung meniscus class, di ba? Imagine nyo ito yung tube. Let's say hindi nyo pinuno. Meron kayo parang makikita ganyan. Dito ka magbabasa sa lower meniscus. Arjen? Arjen, tingin ka dito. Wala ka na ba sa bukid? Wow, okay. So, ayun class. Naintindihan na? The reason why you add water would be para maging same dun sa standard. Then here are the advantages of your Sally's acid hematine. Easy to perform, quick, and inexpensive bedside procedure, and does not require technical expertise. Disadvantage naman dito, class, is for maximum color, longer time is required. Perfect match with the brown glass standard is not possible. So, if nyo na-notice nyo kanina, class, sa picture, di naman talaga sila parehong-pareho. So, mahirap makuha yung same na appearance niya. Then another one would be yung iba nyong hemoglobin, carboxy, methemoglobin, and salt hemoglobin are not converted to acid hematine. Then development of color is slow. Acid hematine is not stable. Source of light will influence the comparison of colors. So imagine your class, if your room is very bright, mag-iiba din yung color ng comparator box. Then the last method, class, considered the best, most accurate method for estimation of hemoglobin. Ito yung homework nyo, class. Recommended by the International Committee of Standardization in Hematology. Because all forms of hemoglobin are converted to cyanamide except your salt hemoglobin. Stable and reliable standard is available. Class, I have a question. When you say photoelectric method, anong machine ang ginagamit dyan? Based sa CC.
Spectrophotometry? Spectrophotometer.
So, tama kayo ni Ms. Banak. So, spectrophotometry. And kapag binanggit niyo yung spectrophotometer, anong rule or law ang related dyan?
Beer's law.
Beer's law. And what does Beer's law say?
The concentration of the sample is directly proportional to the light absorbed and inversely proportional to the light transmitted, sir.
Okay. So the concentration of your sample is inversely proportional to your absorbance. Tama ba, Ms. Benedera? Ulitin mo nga.
Ano, sir? Directly proportional siya
Okay, directly.
sa light absorbance, sir. Inversely proportional siya sa light transmittance, sir.
Okay, so sa sinabi mo, explain mo sa akin ng simpler form yun.
Ano, sir? Bale, if higher ang concentration, higher ang light absorbance, pero lesser ang light na natatransmit, sir.
Alright, very good. So kapag greater yung concentration class, how would you measure your wavelength? Anong unit ng wavelength? Kaya yan. Ano? What's the unit of your wavelength? Hindi CM. Hindi. Malapit na. Hindi?
Millimeter.
Nanometer.
Micrometer. Nanometer.
Nanometer, ha? So the greater the concentration, the greater the wavelength, the lesser the light transmitted. Nag-demo na ba sa inyo si Ma'am Claire regarding sa spectro, kung paano ginagawa?
Kanina po, sir.
So ano natutunan niyo? So ano yung standard niyo? So yung standard niyo, di ba dapat ginawa niyo sa standard?
Ang maalala ko sir, ginawa namin kanina sir is yung nag-test ng glucose, nag-blanking, nag-recalibration, nag-quality control.
Ano yung standard niyo? Hindi kayo nag-standard?
What's yung standard? 120?
Okay, anyway, sige, yan na. Limot ko na rin to kasi class. Dahil yung spectrophonometer nyo, this is a manual procedure. Sa mga, makikita mo to sa mga low-level na, na mga laboratories, mga primary, secondary. Mostly ngayon kasi automated. No? Pintot-pintot ka na lang, wala ka nang gagawin. Except kayo sa machine, okay? Alright, so ito yung pinaka-best class because it converts almost all form of hemoglobin except your salt hemoglobin. Stable and reliable standard is available. Okay, in your cyan methemoglobin class, you have what you call Drabkins. Drabkins reagent. So yan ang reagent nyo. Diba kanina sa salis, 10 normal HCl ang reagent nyo. This time ang Drabkins ang reagent nyo. So your Drabkins has a pH of 7.0 to 7.4. It contains the following: potassium pericyanide, potassium cyanide, potassium dihydrogen phosphate, non-ionic detergent, and distilled water. Now, here are the procedures or the steps na ginagawa ni Drabkins. Erythrocytes are lyes producing an evenly distributed hemoglobin solution. After lysing the RBC class, potassium pericyanide will convert hemoglobin to methemoglobin. Then, methemoglobin class would then be converted to cyan methemoglobin by potassium cyanide. Dated mo class ha. Pericyanide converts hemoglobin to methemoglobin. Potassium cyanide converts methemoglobin to cyan methemoglobin. Daan yan ha, kasi lumalabas yan sa board exam. Walang kamatayang tanong yung klase 5 sa Drabkins. Potassium pericyanide converts hemoglobin to methemoglobin. Methemoglobin to cyan methemoglobin by potassium cyanide. All hemoglobin present in blood are converted to this form. Absorbance is measured at 540 nanometers. To obtain the amount of unknown hemoglobin sample, its absorbance is compared with the standard cyan hemoglobin solution. So meron kayong standard dito class na commercially prepared. So if-feed nyo muna yon para malaman nyo yung tamang concentration or amount na babasahin sa 540 nanometers. Okay, so here's the appearance class of your spectro. So ito yung mga equipment. Spectro, Salis pipette, and your normal pipette. So you would take 5 ml of Drabkins solution, add 220 microliters of blood, then stopper the tube, mix by inverting it several times. Class, anong mangyayari pag ganyan, pag in-invert nyo? Bakit kailangan nyo i-invert, class? What's the reason?
Para hindi mag-settle, sir?
Malamang joke. Bakit nga? Anong ginagawa ba ng Drabkins? Diba, it would lyse your RBC, releasing your hemoglobin. If in-invert mo yan, mas mabilis ang pag-lyse ng RBC. Then allow it to stand for 5 minutes. Para saan tong standing? Kanina, di ba, sa Salis, nag-stand 10 minutes. Bakit dito sa Cyan Met, kailangan mo ulit mag-stand? What does standing do? Bakit kaya may mga procedures kayo na kailangan mag-antay, may standing, may gano'n? Settle.
Para mag-sync ang dapat mag-sync, sir.
Wala nagsisync dyan, Jo. Ayun, nakuha ni Miss Abaw para mag-convert daw. So you would allow it to stand for the reaction to occur. Para yung hemoglobin, maging methemoglobin, methemoglobin, maging cyan methemoglobin. Then you would transfer the sample to a cuvette, read the absorbance in the spectrophotometer at 540 nanometers. Then you would take the absorbance of the standard solution. Plus, tandaan nyo to ha, this is always asked in all your future quizzes. Anong wavelength binabasa si Drapkins nyo? 540 nanometers. Then tandaan nyo rin yung standing time. Pag binasa nyo yung Henry's class na libro, this would become 3 minutes. Kasi sa Henry's, ang gamit nila is a modified Drapkins. Diba, Miss Barcelona? Tobs, binasa mo ba to? Alam ba? Okay. Kala ko binasa mo. Okay. So here are the advantages of your cyan met. All forms of hemoglobin except salt hemoglobin are converted. Plus, is your salt hemoglobin normally found in the blood? Is it usually found in the blood? No. Okay, another question. Is this reversible or irreversible? Naalala nyo class yung ano nyo, yung sickle cell nyo, di ba? Reversible yun. Basta mag-undergo ka lang ng oxygen. So yung salt hemoglobin nyo, is it reversible or irreversible? Okay, irreversible. So yan yung reason class why it is not normally converted. Hindi rin siya nakikita sa blood, then it is also irreversible. Then another advantage should be visual error. There is no color matching required. So hindi na kayo mag-dilute, mag-add ng kung ano-ano para lang masabi nyo na yun yung amount niya. Then yung Drapkins nyo class is very stable. The color does not fade with time, so readings may not be taken immediately. Absorbance may be measured soon after dilution. Then meron kayong reliable and stable reference standard. Disadvantages naman class, diluted blood has to stand for a period of time to ensure complete conversion. Potassium cyanide is a poisonous substance, that is why Drapkins solution must never be pipetted by mouth. So potassium cyanide class, remember pag naka-encounter kayo ng word na cyanide, di ba yung cyanide nyo would be used in killing fishes. Killing fishes. Di ba? Alam niyo ba yan class? Yung mga nangingisda na gumagamit ng cyanide. Pwede rin, dynamite fishing. Yung magbubuhos sila ng cyanide class, tapos yun, lulutang na lang isda. And the rate of conversion of blood containing carboxyhemoglobin is slower. So slower siya class. Kapag may mga patient kayo na smokers, mga malakas manigarilyo, instead of the usual 5 minutes, gagawin nyo siya 30 minutes. Then abnormal plasma proteins causes turbidity when blood is diluted with Drapkins. A high WBC count would also cause turbidity on dilution of blood. Centrifuging the diluted blood can help overcome the turbidity. Last, may question ako. What happens to your WBC if you centrifuge yung ganyan na dilute na turbid yung mixture nyo? Imagine this is the cuvette. Ito yung mix to ng blood sa Drapkins. Ang problem dito, turbid yung solution dahil ang daming WBC ni blood. So sinentry mo. What would happen to the WBCs? Ano mangyayari sa WBCs na class?
Mag-separate, sir.
Oo nga, mag-separate. Saan sila mapupunta?
Bali sa baba sila, sir.
Sa baba. Okay. So, anong tawag na sa kanila? Pag nasa baba na sila, after centrifugation. They're called what? Di ba nag-centri kayo, pumunta na siya sa baba. So, anong tawag na dun sa mga nakikita niyo sa baba? Bakit precipitate? Ang precipitate class.
Plasma cell?
Hindi. Medyo malapit na ang sagot ni Carl sa ni Marian. Pero ang precipitate kasi class is located at the top. What do you call the things located at the bottom?
Sul.
Sige, malapit. Starts with the letter S.
Solute.
Hindi supernatant. Kaya mo yan, malapit na.
Supernatant.
Hindi
Daw.
supernatant. hindi solute. S
Sink.
class.
Sink centrifuge WBC. Char.
Nasaan na kayo sa CM? Nagsisentry na ba kayo ng urine sa CM?
Wait lang, sir. Ayos answer sir. Ayos ha.
Second letter E. First letter S. Ano si Rom dyan, City? Ano ba? Nag-aalok ka ng Drubkins eh. Drubkins, ano ba? Malapit yun, is Abaw sediments. Okay. So ngayon, sinentry mo na, nag-sediments na sa baba. Anong tawag mo na dito sa solution na to? Starts with the letter S then.
Supernatant.
Alright, very good. Yung supernatant. And anong itsura dapat ng supernatant nyo?
Clean.
It would be, ano itsura? It would appear as clear. Kasi nawala na yung mga particles, specifically your WBCs. So kapag clear na siya, class, pwede nyo na siyang i-run sa Gasometric. Pansin nyo, class, gawin nyo to, test nyo to. Mag-collect kayo ng urine. Lagay nyo sa isang clear na container. So sayaan nyo lang siya mag-settle. Hayaan nyo lang siya, huwag nyo siyang galawin siguro mga 1 oras or 2 oras. Makikita nyo dun sa baba, kung meron kayong UTI or meron kayong infection, makikita nyo dun sa baba na may mga powders, may mga pulbo, and so on. Mga sediments. And what you call the portion after the liquid portion would be the supernate. So that ends our discussion for your PVT 4.0. Sige nga.